And we're live. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour with our favorite author, Will Leach,
Woo woo!
and special guests today. We'll introduce her here in a second. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour. Where's my roll in here? There we go.
There we go.
Mindstate Marketing Hour. With the groovy music, an interview with Sarah Levinger. Will, you've been on stage, have you?
I've been on stage first time in 2 years, my friend. Austin, Texas. I was at a conference called IIEX, talking to a bunch of my brethren, researchers, behavioral psychologists, and I was the guy on stage a lot. So I'm a little bit tired. It's been a long 3 days, but good. It was really cool getting back on stage, talking about my passion. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellent. I'm in Kansas City.
Oh, that's right.
I'm mobile, so I'm here in my room. There's my bed back there, but I still can do a live stream.
That is a testament to your fortitude and your technology and all the progress you've made in the last 3 years. That's great.
At least I have something to show.
Yes.
Will, introduce our guest.
Yes. So I am very happy. Sarah, this is weird. Usually Steve and I talk for so long and it's always awkward, right? So we got to get you in the show. Sarah, I am excited to talk to Sarah Levinger. So Sarah Levinger is the founder of Halftone Graphics, a full service design agency, Steve. But what she told me, I'm gonna tell you what she told me, and then we're gonna talk about this a little bit later on. But a performance creative strategist, an ICP developer, and a UGC producer. So there's a lot of acronyms I think we're gonna need to get into. But here's what I love about her, right? She helps direct to consumer brands generate better ROI using behavioral psychology, something you and I talk about all the time. Steve, do you believe it? There's other people out there.
There's another one out there that talks about this stuff.
It's true. So short story on Sarah. So Sarah, and you probably know the story better than I do. Sarah just reached out to me because she read the book Marketing to Mind States, right? And what was so cool about it, I think it was just basically contacted me saying, I just love what you do, right? And I looked her up, I stalked, and I said, holy cow, she's a creative designer. Like, she's using this stuff, right? This is awesome. And so I was like, I couldn't believe that actually there are designers out there that are, using the book, but also that you've been doing it, Sarah, for a while, like outside of my book, right? You've been bringing these sciences in and doing great things for your business as well as, your clients' businesses. And we just don't have the opportunity to talk to practitioners oftentimes. So that's why I was like, I just want to have you on the show, bring you in, talk a little bit about your life, talk about behavioral sciences, behavioral economics, and then talk a little bit about how you're doing, some great work with your company and kind of just go from there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's so fun to talk to people who are deep into the research because I've been doing this kind of on my own as like a small time practitioner for it's probably been about 12, 13 years now. I started out as a freelancer when I was 21, way back in the day before it was like even cool to be an entrepreneur. And when I started doing it, it was on accident entirely. I had a big company that I worked with. They made water testing instruments, and so they brought me on to be kind of like graphic designer, brand strategist. So everything that went out the door, I had to make sure was on brand, perfect every time. Messaging had to like match. So I started out in brand, but they only kept that position for me for 2 years. And then they cut it. Once they cut that position, they were like, hey, we really like working with you. Why don't you just go start a business and then we'll just work with you as a contractor? And at the time I was like, I'm 22. I don't know how to do that. How do you start a business? I don't even know. So I figured it out. Luckily, LegalZoom was the thing at the time. So from there, I just spent the next 10 years building up a freelance business. So I did everything from email marketing to wireframing. I did WordPress websites. I had Amazon FBA store. I did Etsy. Like I had a ton of different small marketing businesses. And in that time, I was learning as much as I could about marketing, and there was a lot of good books that were coming out. But I noticed that the advice that I was getting from a lot of the people in my circle, at least, was the same over and over and over and over. So everybody seemed to kind of be regurgitating the same information. And I wanted to stand out. I wanted to get a bigger crowd, more business. So I went to, oddest of places, the library, and I checked out a bunch of books. And the majority of them were psychology, because I was like, there's got to be something more to this marketing thing. It has to be deeper than just, use these colors, say this phrase, use this social proof, that type of thing. And when I started kind of diving into all of the psychology, I went down rabbit holes into
Yeah.
this like neuroscience and like all this different stuff about behavior, things that like I didn't hear anybody else talking about. And for a while, I kept it to myself because
Mhm.
I didn't really know what to do with it. And so I was like, okay, I'll just use it for my clients, and we'll craft messaging around it, and we'll put it into our graphic design and into our work and see what comes of it. And then from there, I accidentally, this seems to happen to me a lot, accidentally stumbled into paid marketing. So that's what I'm involved in now. Majority of it is for e-commerce brands. So a lot of direct to consumer DTC brands, and almost all of it is for paid marketing. So Facebook ads, Instagram ads, TikTok ads, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, those type of things. And I can't even tell you how much the behavior has helped, not just to set me apart as a marketer, but it has helped push these brands to a completely different level because they're doing something that no other brand is doing. And that's, they're focusing on the behavior. They're focusing on the
Mhm.
strategy from a psychological standpoint.
So did you go to school? I mean, what was your background, your educational background, to even know that psychology existed? Because I didn't really know that. I was an economist. So how did you even know about this stuff? Do you remember when you were first introduced to this idea of psychology and
Ooh, that's a
sociology,
great
whatever it
question.
is?
I actually never finished college.
Uh-huh.
College was not for me. I really enjoyed the classes. I enjoyed learning, and I still do. I'm kind of a self-motivated learner though, so I read and read and read all
Yeah.
the time. But I got through, I think, like a year and a half of college, and I was like, this is not for me. The classes just moved way too slow. I was like, pick up the pace. Like, come on, come on.
I could
Like,
tell,
there's
Steve.
got to
Yeah.
be more. Like, this is so slow. And so I think from there, my sister-in-law was going to school to be a child and family therapist, and so she
Mm.
was taking like psychology classes, and so she would bring home things and just show them to me, and I was like, this is really interesting. Like, it's different. I'm in marketing. Like, I'm in a totally different world than you are, but I could see how some of this stuff would apply to what we're doing because we're selling to humans and you're studying humans. So she was kind of the one that kind of introduced me at first, but from there I just got hooked, like just on the knowledge itself. I just wanted more and more and more knowledge, and so I just read all through my 20s, just hundreds of books, read
Yeah.
and read and read.
There you go. Self-taught. That's similar to me as well. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was going to say that, when I found Will's book, I reached out to him as well. When did you stumble into Will's book, and why did it get you so jacked up?
Yes, this is a fun story. I don't even think I've
I don't
told
even know
Will
the
this
story.
yet. So I have like several library apps on my phone, and it's because I love to read books. I don't necessarily like to pay for them until I know they're a good book. And this is just because I've read so many now that some of them I'm like, I paid for this, and this is not really what I needed. So
Yeah.
yay for spending money on something I don't need. Very frugal person, so I try not to do that. So I had a whole bunch of these library apps, and I literally just type in psychology, or I'll type in behavior economics, those types of things, just things I'm interested in. And Will's was one of the one that popped up, but I couldn't get it as a library book. It was like totally taken. Which is amazing to me because they're digital books. You'd think that there'd
I
be
know. I know
billions
they're
of
like, we have
copies.
5 copies of a digital book in a library. You can have millions of.
I'm like,
I'm so
what?
with you. I don't understand that business model at all.
I don't get it either. There's like 3 copies and there was 27 holes. I'm like, this is dumb. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. So the interesting part is, for a long time, Will had a specific book cover on there that is different from the one you had now. So
Mhm.
the book cover that you had before was a picture of a brain, and it was very colorful, and it had like a white top and the bottom was colors. And
Mhm.
it was very sciencey looking, right?
Yep.
And I was like, this looks like a textbook, and I'm super into textbooks. So it
Uh,
resonated well with me as a person. And I was like, this is great. I'm gonna get this book, even if I can't get it at the library. I'm just gonna buy it because it looks good and like the reviews are fantastic. So I just devoured it in like 3 days, just read straight through it. And after that, I mean, I started applying it to things and started seeing good results with my clients. And I read it again, and I read it again, and I read it again.
mm,
And the funniest part is, I think I've read it about 4 times before I even contacted Will.
wow. Yep.
Because there was just so many things I kept picking up over and over. Every time I read it, there was something new and something interesting that I didn't catch before. So this last time that I read it, um, the cover was totally different when I went to go
That's
pick
right.
it up again. I was like, I hope this is the same. I think it's the same book. So after I read it this time, I was like, I'm just going to reach out and tell him he's doing a great job. Like, I love your work. I love what you're doing. I'm applying it. It's working. And that was just on a whim. And then Will actually wrote me back. I was like, oh, yay.
I'm trying to be human in business, Steve. Steve coaches me on that kind of stuff. Like, reply to your emails.
We appreciate it out here because a lot of times I'll contact people and I will hear nothing.
Yeah. So, no, we talk about that a lot. We talk about that a lot. So let's talk a little bit about, we've already kind of transitioned, I think. And for those of you who are on the show and you're wondering, we like to talk about being human in business and the power of being human in business, in small business. We don't like to talk about that guy over there at Amazon. We don't like to talk about that guy who used to run Apple. Those are incredibly great stories, but those are not heroes. The heroes of today are small businesses. Like the small business owners that's down the street making me great pizza, and the person who's trying to get me into shape and things like that. But what I love about what you bring to the table, Sarah, is this idea that you're bringing, and I could make the case that you're being more human in business, because I think we all have to as small business owners, and having empathy for our customers, things like that. But you're bringing this kind of psychological empathy into your creative. And that's the part that I'm not so sure if many people know. So can you tell me a little bit about, like, when we first started talking, you had said that you had a process, or you have a process. And what you've done is it sounds like you've done something similar as me. In fact, you went down rabbit holes and you found some things that worked, some things you tried, stuff that probably didn't work. And over the last 10 years, you found a program, a system, something. And now you've gotten this Mindstate marketing. You're applying at least some elements of it. Can you tell listeners a little bit about kind of what you do? And then how and where does the Mindstate marketing model fit into any of that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So in paid marketing, what I'm basically doing is I'm working with a lot of direct-to-consumer brands. We call it DTC brands. And these brands are they're not micro brands, but they're not like macro brands. So they're not Pepsi, they're not Coca-Cola, they're not like the big ones. They're, you're looking more at like Old Spice, you're looking more at Loom deodorant, you're looking more at, Magic Spoon cereal. Like, they're smaller brands, but they're still making a decent chunk of money. So they have, the revenue to go ahead and spend money on ads and paid advertising to get their products out there. So they'll hire a couple different people to come in and do this. They'll obviously hire copywriters, they'll hire graphic designers, and in particular, they'll hire media buyers. So somebody to actually go on the back end of Facebook and purchase advertising for them through Facebook ads. And they'll do this with Google ads, with LinkedIn ads. All of the platforms have their own ad kind of system. So when I started out, I was actually just a media buyer. I just came in and basically lifted the levers for them. And accidentally, it keeps happening to me a lot. I always kind of accidentally fall into weird things. But I accidentally found that people were asking me over and over for creative strategy. They were like, you seem like you're really solid on the graphic design side, the copywriting side, the messaging. Can you do this for us? We want to bring you in and do more creative strategy with you. So when I started doing that, I knew that this was going to be a perfect place to kind of meld the two, bring graphic design and copywriting over to the side of psychology and behavior science. So what I did was I took Will's model, which still works fantastic today. I mean, I kind of use your book as a reference constantly. Anytime I'm building up new creative strategy for people, I'll take your book, go to the very back, which has all like the resources references. And then I'll go through all of the mind states and double check myself just to make sure that what I'm seeing from the data is actually what people are feeling. So for my strategy, I start always in the comments always, because it's kind of amazing. People get really frustrated, I think, with comments and reviews nowadays because people get really intense. However, the internet and social media has done a very interesting thing for people in general, and that's to give them a platform where they can say whatever they want the minute they feel it, right? So a lot of times these comments are extremely real, very raw. And they come from a place, as long as they're not just trying to be harsh, they usually come from a genuine place of like, this is how I actually feel about this product. So for my clients and company, I'll go through and read just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments, as many as I can find. I'll usually start on the platforms that tend to have the strongest opinionated class, which is usually TikTok. TikTok commenters are a different breed.
That's what I hear. I got to tell you a story about that.
They are intense. So I'll start on TikTok, read all the comments, segue over to Instagram because they're usually pretty intense about their comments as well. And then we'll field to LinkedIn and Facebook, depending on the brand. I'll take all those comments, I'll put them into a spreadsheet, and then the rest of it's just aggregating data. Like I just go through, take it, put it into sentiment analyzers, I'll put it into word cloud analyzers, and I'll just sit there and crunch all this data down until I can start spotting trends. So then I'll pull all this out of like, this particular crowd is talking about this coffee in a very nurturing kind of way. They're talking about, I gave this coffee to my husband, or I gifted it to my daughter. Like she really loved it. There's things that you can start to see if you read that many comments. If you got 500 to 1,000 comments that you're reading, you're going to start to notice how people resonate with the brand, how they're using the product, and how they feel about it when they're using it. So for me, it's pretty easy, but I've noticed that a lot of people don't have this experience. I've had 10 years of just understanding the science of it. So I've had to teach a lot. These brands go in and tell them, just from the comments, I can usually tell where people sit, and it gives us a place to start. Now that may not be where we end up, but at least we have a place to start and say, okay, if these people are optimistic and thinking on their worldview, and they're thinking about being nurturing to the people around them, that's what we need to craft our messaging on first, and we'll move from there.
Yep.
So that's, yeah.
No, it's a great point for, I love, sometimes people get intimidated by behavioral science, and they hear words like context and heuristics and things like that. What you just said is actually really important. So there are companies like mine, in fact, that can do marketing research to get people in the moment of a decision to understand and identify their mind state. What Sarah has taught you guys how to do is do the exact type of work. You have people in context. They just recently had an experience with your brand. They felt probably negative. That's the issue there, but fine. Many times, but not always. Sometimes people love brands. I've done it before where I've loved brands and jumped on social media. She's aggregating all these comments because people are in the moment. And when people are in the moment, they're more likely to express their mind state. That's why we do research. We place people into moments, and we ask them to do projective techniques to do kind of what Sarah's doing naturally. Like I'm trying to use projective techniques to get people to project themselves in that moment. Sarah actually has the verbatims when people are in that moment, and she just aggregates them, right? So sometimes I think this stuff feels like very, oh my gosh, it's so esoteric, so difficult. It's not. It's just taking the time and a structure, which is important, is having a structure. And what you're doing is just kind of using word cloud, sentiment analysis, stuff that's free to use, right, Steve? This stuff is free to use, this kind of stuff out there to derive some basic insights. But those basic insights, though they sound simple, they're not simplistic at all, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's really brilliant. You're going and observing the comments, because if you were to put people down and ask them the questions, how do you feel? They're trying to guess what you're wanting to hear, and you're going to get a totally different thing. That's so smart and crowdsourcing.
Exactly. Well, and the majority of it comes down to understanding people. So a lot of I don't like to come at this from a standpoint of like tooting my own horn. Like I'm the only person that can do this. Anybody can do this.
Yeah.
Right.
However, working with me for my clients makes it faster because I've been doing it for 10 years. So I kind of understand what to look for when it comes to comments, because different words mean different things. And this is something I've been teaching a lot. I'm over on Twitter all day long because that's where the e-com universe lives. All of the people who are media buyers or founders, brand owners, agencies usually talk on Twitter a lot. So over there, I've been teaching people the difference between words matters quite a lot when it comes to comments, specifically because I've noticed in marketing, people will stick to maybe 5 different emotions: mad, sad, happy, elated, or like fearful, right?
Yeah.
And they won't deviate from that. Any of their messaging, any of their copywriting, even the images that they choose, mad, sad, happy, elated, fear. Like it's the same thing over and over. So I had to teach people a lot that there are millions of different emotions that we feel. Right. Sad could mean grief. It could also mean frustration. It could also like
despair.
Despair, depression. Like there's different forms of sad. And if you're messaging your brand, especially if your brand is, in particular, a pharmaceutical company, and you're trying to get people to sign up for, whatever, and you're trying to message towards people who have depression, you can't say sad. Because sad and depression are 2 totally different things. People who have depression suffer physically from that. Not that people who are sad don't feel it physically, but it's a different feeling. It's a totally different experience when you're depressed. And this is why I try to get people to understand, like, I'm a pretty deep feeler. I soak up feelings from people anyways. And so it comes easily to me. But for a lot of people, I don't think the feeling part of it comes easy. So
Mhm.
it's difficult to learn, like, what should I be saying instead of sad, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. No, it makes total sense. We talk about that in the book, and also just in behavioral psychology, right? That, and I
Yeah.
think what you hear is people do a very superficial. They have a very superficial understanding of emotions because that comes from a very superficial exploration of emotions from Paul Ekman's work. And so his stuff that he did in the '60s is still out there today. And we all
Yeah.
used to think in the '70s and '80s that was truth, but truth is much more complex, right? And
Exactly.
sometimes it takes somebody who's just empathetic like you to know intuitively. You don't have to read Ekman's work to realize that that one emotion, sad, is not in and of itself the emotion. There are hundreds of iterations and types of things
Yeah.
around that. And the other thing, I guess, what you're also able to do, which is really cool, and I tell my clients this all the time, use the exact words that your customers are using. And Steve, you and I actually talked about this, I think in a show to whatever the last show was. We said, if you want to succeed in business, the best way to do that is to be able to articulate the problems of your consumer better than they can. And if you can nail that language and they're like, whoa, you just told me what I think, you'll win. That's perfect empathy. It's amazing what you can do, but you got to be able to get into the real words of how people talk.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the sentiment analyzer that you use, Sarah? I'm interested. So you take these comics and you dump them into a tool.
Hmm. So the free one that I use is called Monkey Learn. It's fairly rudimentary, I would say. It's good if you're going to use it just to start out, just to start getting some ideas for things. They have a paid version that's way more robust, which is kind of helpful. But for starting out with clients, I like to use the Monkey Learn one. Their word cloud is actually one of the ones that I like to use the most because for the most part, people don't, as you said, well, people don't really understand that they should use the terms that their customers are using. And the word cloud just makes it easier to pull those words out because people are like, well, which word should I use?
Yep.
I'm like, okay, well, let's just put it in a word cloud and I'll just pull them out for you. Here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. Use these ones first, And again, we talk about this all the time in DTC is everything is a test. Everything is a test. Everything is a test. But I feel like in that particular industry, people have almost overused this as an excuse to not do the research first. And I struggle with it because I enjoy the research. I love doing it. So that's what I start with always. But I'm noticing that this is almost becoming a crutch that like if something's not working and we don't know why, we're just going to blame it on, well, that was a test, which I don't necessarily believe in because I'm like, you shouldn't be testing just because you don't know what to do. Like there's a way for you to find out what to do. So yeah, and this is why I'm trying really hard to push this message forward of like behavior science first, psychology first. Like you need to understand where people are emotionally, because otherwise we're just throwing stuff at the wall and we're hoping something sticks, and that's a bad way to waste money.
So let me ask you. So you got into recently, I don't know, a couple of years ago, this idea that hey, we think you can offer us a lot more around brand strategy and creative development. But then in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I've been reading all this stuff about psychology too. So those are very different fields, honestly. Yeah. So how do you bring those? Like, what's your approach of bringing those things together?
Yeah. So the interesting part about the two different fields is they meld together super well, honestly. Like the graphic design and copywriting part of it is more the functional. This is how we like build it out, but you need the emotional kind of like, I guess, abstract to go along with it. And that's why I always start with that first. So once I have it nailed down, like your customer from a demographics standpoint is a 26-year-old female. She lives in Chicago. She's working full time. She's not married. She doesn't have any kids. That's the demographics. Then we'll go deeper into, she just started a vegan journey. She has a great relationship with her friends. She really likes to do things in a social manner. She wants to start leaning more towards vegan diet, but she's not sure how to do it. And you have a subscription vegan meal plan. Okay, well, the easiest way to figure out how to message to her then is start with the psychology. We can do copywriting, graphic design later, but let's start with the psychology first. What is she feeling when she decided she needed to find vegan foods in an easier way, right? And this is what everybody kind of misses, I think, is like, what's the triggering event? What made her decide that she even needed to find vegan food? Because without that, we really have no idea how to market to her. You can't just put out a bunch of like, try our vegan food subscription, because maybe she's not even looking for a subscription right now, right? So we're wasting time, wasting money if we're not doing the research first. So yeah, to meld the two together, we start with the research, figure out what the trigger event was, and figure out what her emotional state is, and then message to the emotional state with the copywriting, graphic design.
An important thing you said, and I don't want it to slip, is this idea of starting with the trigger event. Yeah. So I think, and I come from a CPG background, right? Big companies have all these resources, millions of dollars are spent on research, but they oftentimes they research on themselves, like our brand. What is our brand meaning to our customers, right? So they're talking about themselves. But they don't, or very superficially, they'll talk about an occasion. They'll say, "Oh, well, tell me about the last time you had chips in a sandwich, and tell me about what you're feeling." What you said is actually really important. This trigger event, and this idea that there is a point in time where somebody chose. Hopefully, you get it close to the first time. That's difficult, but if you get that first time. The reason, guys, why you want to do that, if you're listening to this, is that you may have 100 people who have had that trigger event, and you can market those 100 people. Great. Or you could have 10,000 people who have not had that trigger event, but you can actually, but if you know about that moment, what somebody needed in that moment, you can message to that moment. This is why we talk about marketing to mind states and trigger points. When you message to that moment, you can trigger people to look into themselves, be interested, go, you know what? Going vegan is something I'm interested in. If you don't know that moment, you can't trigger that emotional state. So you're always messaging to the 10,000 who have done it, but you're not bringing as many people into your category as you can. It's really important, Sarah, that you said that, because people think about messaging my brand to you, or when you're going to eat my brand, take my brand, let's talk about that moment, but not talking about the initial trigger event. And that's how you bring people into a category.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What's important is like there's the empathy is what's going to bring you into that moment. And if you're not human, if you're not approaching this from a human way, then you're going to miss out on that. Okay. And that's imagine that person, what happened that they decided to change their whole lifestyle and eat different. There's something that was really going on with them that they were worried that if they didn't make that change, something was going to happen that they didn't want.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and people, I think also miss that trigger events can happen years before they decide to buy your product. Years and years. It doesn't happen within 7 days. It doesn't happen within 2 weeks. And in our model for e-com and DTC, specifically for like Facebook, Instagram, we work on 7-day to 28-day models. So attribution for when people actually purchase a product from you doesn't really go past 28 days. We don't track it past that, which is, I mean, you can, like from a physical standpoint, you can, but most people do not. It's a 7-day click window, like 7-day click, 1-day view. That's all we have. You can't really attribute any purchase past that, which is amazing to me because I have a consumer in my house. My husband is like a brand guy. As soon as he gets on a brand, he's like, this is the brand for life. And I love them. And I'm only going to buy from this brand. And it's funny. I tell people this story all the time. He was a Nike guy for 10 years, just Nike, everything, Nike shorts, Nike shirt, Nike shoes, everything was Nike. And then he had one bad customer experience where he tried to replace a pair of shoes that for some reason broke down within a month. And they wouldn't replace them for some reason. They were just like, sorry, we can't help you. And from then on, he was like, never, no Nike, no one in the family. We're not wearing Nike ever again. But for years, I mean, the guy just kept buying them. Like Nike created a habit for him, right? It was just a behavioral habit of like, I love this brand. But to get into the Nike brand, he sat on that. I mean, like he did a ton of research trying to figure out which brand he wanted to go with. And this is the one he decided he loved. But it took him a while from I need new shoes to I love Nike, only Nike, right? The pathway to it was a long period of time. And so this is why brand building is super, super important, especially in e-com and direct to consumer, because you're not trying to get people to buy more. You're trying to get people to buy in more. Like we need something for me to believe in so that I can purchase from you. Because really, if your brand doesn't have a personality, if your brand's not a human, I don't want to buy into a robot. I just feel weird about that. You need emotions coming from the brand to be able to connect.
So that is not an easy thing to do,
No,
right? How do you?
definitely
So
not.
tell me, and you might have an easier job than others. Maybe it depends on what the brands. But so you're sitting back, you have a company, maybe you have a founder who's introverted, who doesn't really have a story, who thought the only thing that comes to mind. I did a speech yesterday with a construction company. And what they were talking about is, so I was talking to the marketers, and they were saying how important, they're trying to build a whole function around marketing and importance. Like, people buy off of emotion, but the heads of almost every construction company out there were former builders, and they think in the world of price per square foot or cost per square foot.
Yeah.
And so, them trying to get the idea of that when you buy a house, you are buying a home was foreign to them. Yeah. So I'm sure there's lots of those things. Like, how do you have a process of trying to draw out the humanity out of a brand, whether it's established or not? Do you have a process of doing that, or is it just intuitive to who you are?
Yeah, well, and I always like to come at things from a strategy standpoint, because if I can't show people actual physical like papers, I tend to get the same response, which is like, I don't understand what you're saying. So I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets, like as much as I can possibly show them in a physical standpoint helps a lot for people understanding, especially if your client is an analytical brain and comes at life from a more like pessimistic standpoint. Yep. I analyze my own clients as well, like not just their clients, but I'm analyzing my clients just so that everybody can be on the same page. It's just easier all around. So one of the recent ones that I did was I'm marketing a brand that makes yoga mats, which don't seem very emotional, right? Like, it's a yoga mat. There's only one thing you can really do with it, and that's yoga. So the founder came to me, and he had spent quite a lot of money on ads. Like, he put a chunk of money into this, and was like, none of the agencies I've worked with have been able to generate anything. I just don't know where to go, because it seems like there's a ton of competition, which there is. Yoga mats is a really competitive space. And so I went through, I was like, no problem. Like, let's do the research. Let's figure out what your people are doing, right? So we did the research, and we found out specifically people were buying from him from a functional standpoint. All of the demographic that was buying his product were mostly women. And all of them were buying it because it was really grippy. They liked it because they didn't slip and slide, in hot yoga in particular. So I was like, this tells us something. One, it tells us these women like hot yoga. Like, we need to look into that. Why hot yoga, right? Like, why that particular one? And it's interesting once you start going down these rabbit holes, because you can create brand based upon basically anything, but you need to start looking at, okay, how do I message to people in a way that hits emotionally and functionally at the same time? They're buying it because it's grippy and hot yoga. But once we started doing the actual customer surveys, which is something I love to do, I always tell people, can I please get on the phone with your customers? Yeah. Because I can only go so far with comments. So from the customer surveys, we were finding that these women were actually using the mats around their home, which was weird. I've never heard anybody doing this before. I don't do this. And this is why customer surveys, 100%, please do customer surveys. They were using their yoga mats like in front of their dish sink, so that they wouldn't slide around when they were doing dishes. I was like,
it's actually pretty brilliant, man. Actually, right? That's
I was like, cool. I would have never thought of that. Like, this blew my mind. And they were using it in other places, not just to do yoga, but they would do, just regular like weightlifting workouts and things like that. So I told the founder, I said, we got to shift messaging entirely. This is not just a yoga mat. This is a piece of your home, right? You're bringing this in almost as like a home accent piece. You can use it in more ways than just as a yoga mat. And it shouldn't just be something you roll up, stick in the corner, you only use once. It should be laying out all the time for you to do all kinds of things that require you to stay put, to not slip, right? Because this was very important for these ladies. They didn't want to get injured. So for construction or anybody that has a functional product, figure out how your people are using the product. And this is why that, like, it's not a house, it's a home, works so well, because people aren't using it as a house.
That's right.
They're using it as a home.
Very much so. Love that. Yeah. Love that answer.
So what is UGC producer?
UGC. Oh my gosh. This is a topic that is very interesting because, man, it's got some people either love it or they hate it. UGC stands for user generated content. And specifically content that is not curated by the brand. So TikTok in particular is all UGC, user generated content. It's just videos of people who decided to randomly wake up and film themselves doing something. The reason it came about now that brands are using it as a marketing tool is because probably about 2-3 years ago, brands started noticing that if they generated their own user generated content, it would hit extremely well. They could sell a lot of products with it. And it didn't really start taking off until early last year. Over the summer, I saw it just exploding. And now that we're into 2022, there's UGC creators all over the place, and different levels of experience. So when you create this, it's very interesting because people really do think I turn my camera on my phone and I talk to the camera about the product. I love this product. I use it every day. It's so great. You should buy it, right? Like that kind of a very odd testimonial style video. That's not what UGC is. UGC is basically a glimpse into someone's life of what they're doing around the product, but mostly just like a day in the life of a person. And I tell people this all the time. UGC is meant to trigger mirror neurons. That's all it's trying to do, is get people to basically put themselves into somebody else's situation and view themselves with the product. It sells extremely well. Like this is a huge media type for advertisers right now because it works like no other medium we've ever seen. Because it's meant to look like somebody in their backyard just created it on a whim.
So give an example.
So one of the UGC that I created recently was for the yoga brand that I was working with. And we had found like a tiny little comment from somebody that said, do you have any recommendations for yoga mats that don't slip? I hate mine, right? So I took that particular comment, cropped it out, put it into Photoshop, and put it on top of the video that I was doing. So that way everybody could see this is the question that someone asked, and this is the video that solves it. The video was super simple. It was the beginning of it was me slipping and sliding on a mat that I own at my house. So it was just like sliding all over the place, trying to do moves, and I just kept falling all over. The next clip was me shown on the actual yoga mat we were trying to sell, and I was doing very fluid movements. I showed that I was very stable, and there was text overlay on it that said, you know, I love this mat. It's super grippy. I've never found any mat that's better. The end, basically. Like the interesting part about UGC too is we're not really ending with any call to action. It's just,
it just is.
Here's a mat, yeah. And we're letting people come to their own conclusion, which is super powerful. Like as soon as somebody thinks that they thought of it, it's way better for sales than it is if you're like, this is the mat you should buy, please go buy it type of thing. So it's just content. It's just somebody viewing somebody do something with a product. It's very interesting.
That is. I have to give some thought.
I love that. So I'm curious, you know, so brainstorming, storyboarding that, you know, walk it through for someone like me. Give me like 3 little steps how you did that.
Yeah. So when you're looking to create UGC, there's 2 different types. One is organic and one is for paid. Organic UGC is usually not meant to be long. It's anywhere between 10 and 15 seconds, somewhere in there. It's TikTok style. So it really needs to be quick off the cuff. And organic UGC almost always has what we call native fonts, native sounds. So anything that you can find in the app. Organic UGC is almost always created in the platform itself. It's never really created outside of the platform and then brought in. So if you're an organic UGC creator, you're basically going to want to turn your camera on 3 to 4 times a day. It's pretty intensive. I've seen people do less, but usually the average is 3 to 4 times a day. And you're going to want to talk about something that surrounds the product. Doesn't have to be the product itself, just something that surrounds it. So for instance, if you're selling a yoga mat, you might turn your camera on and say, this is my like go-to morning routine for making sure that I have a really good start to my day. Pouring coffee, making something super good for breakfast, putting on clothes that make me feel good, walking out the door. Doesn't have to be intense, right? That's your whole video. But because it's kind of related to yoga, and if people continue to watch your videos, then they'll start to see, oh, she also incorporates yoga. I like that mat that she has. Which mat is that? Like, let's click on this and see what it is. If you're going for paid, I see most people creating this in Adobe Premiere or bringing it out in, there's a app on your phone called CapCut, where you can basically create this yourself outside of the platform and then bring it back in to run ads. The paid strategy is a little bit more structured. It's very direct marketing focused, direct response in particular. So if you kind of know that style of marketing, it's the first part of it is always a hook, some sort of hook. And when I'm talking about hooks, I'm talking about it has to be something that's going to grab your attention really quickly and keep it for long periods of time. I've never seen a UGC video that goes past 45 seconds. Usually the mid-range is about 30 seconds. They're really short. And the split cuts between all of the actual sequenced videos are like a second to 2 seconds long. It's like really fast. And we do that because we're trying to keep people's attention. We're trying really hard to not lose attention. Because if we get halfway through the video and we haven't resonated with them, they're going to scroll away immediately. So once you have that video started and you have all these little cuts in there, you're going to want to start with whatever the problem is, move into whatever the solution is, give some sort of social proof, and then go to a call to action. I haven't seen anybody deviate from that structure almost ever. So that's the basics of it.
That's excellent.
I know that's better than what I normally do. Steve asked me to get more specific, and I just take it one little layer lower. So like that's why I've never seen Steve write down my answers like the way he wrote down yours. By the way,
I feel
Steve,
so
we're
bad.
taping this. By the way, you don't have to write in per. Like we're taping it. You can watch it later.
Got me if I'm talking too much, because again, I mean I could talk about this stuff all day long, and
I
there's
know.
layers beneath those layers. This is just like the high level.
I got so just another question for you, and we'll wrap it up. But it's an important question. So you and I have talked for the last couple of weeks probably about this need, right? I look at a world of behavioral science, which is basically a bunch of scientists talking to each other. And then we get every so often people like Steve or like you that kind of fall into it, right? That they found it somehow, but it's not being taught maybe in schools, or it's not in large social groups. So you have a bunch of behavioral scientists talking to themselves. And then we have a bunch of an entire creative industry that is learning some of this stuff, but it's really slow. They wander into it. So we have these two industries. And you and I have talked about, my gosh, if more designers and creatives understood that there's science behind it, it's fascinating. It's there. They should know more about it. And I've been talking about, my gosh, if behavioral researchers and people that understood that there are actually people who use these insights to do better messaging, to build better products and services, but they don't think about that. They're like, my job is to come up with the human insight, and then I walk away. So you and I have been talking about this idea of trying to figure out how to merge these groups. I mean, we're two people, but it'll be a long thing, but trying to bring these two groups together. So two-part question. First question is, why are they not? Like, is there like fear? Is it just they're not aware? Why aren't these two groups just one? I had a similar question yesterday at this conference, but they were talking about marketing and research. Same exact idea. But then the second thing is, okay, so then what will it take to get these two industries, people talking? Like, what is the way that 5 years from now, you and I are not talking about, man, we should really be talking more. We're talking about, oh my gosh, the whole industry has totally changed. So why aren't they talking? And then what can we do differently to get these two kind of entities to do more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from a DTC, like e-com experience, people don't know that this exists. People come to me for creative strategy, and I start talking about the psychology and why people are purchasing and what goes into the actual purchasing journey, and they're like blown away. And to me, it's very natural. I've been doing it for a long time, so I'm like, oh, this is just how it is. I just don't think there's enough people on my side that know that this is a little bit life-changing from a marketing standpoint. They just don't know. So that right there is, a tiny bit of just a lack of knowledge. The more we talk about it, the more people get into it. I know maybe 3 or 4 people over there that are doing what I do. Yeah. From a marketing research side, I think it comes down to being valued as a marketer. Like, you're not just a researcher, but you have found insights that we desperately need. We desperately need it on this side because we don't know. The only 2 things that we've ever known is social proof and authority proof. And we use it over and over and over, and we cannot get off of this loop. It just continues to snowball, and everybody is only talking about hooks. You need a hook Where's your hook? Is your hook good? Let's get another hook. Let's just brainstorm more hooks. I'm like, we need good researchers to come in and say, there is a depth to your particular target market that we haven't even touched on yet. There's so many different angles that we could try and market to. And we need those people to understand that, like, we need you. We need you guys so bad to tell us what people are feeling, because we don't have that information.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, do you have any thoughts on that same idea? I mean, you kind of found us too, right? But you kind of seemed like a guy you were reading out the same books behind me before we met, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the idea there?
No, what she's offering is a way to break out of the one size fits all messaging. That's what is wrong with marketing. I mean, it's all cliche. People understand it. They're offended by it. And when they accidentally stumble into a brand that actually connects with them, they're like her husband. They become loyalty, you know, and they're super loyal. And then all of a sudden you mess it up because you betray that loyalty. Think about how upset he got. You know how much invested he was in that brand.
It's self-identity too, by the way. It's not just money, but there's an identity component of a brand, right?
I mean, he was like emotionally distraught about it.
Yeah, and he's not just me, but you're not going to wear it.
Yeah,
and you're not going to wear it.
I mean, granted, like, I have Nike shoes, so like nobody, like, let's.
You're not making my decisions for me.
Exactly. I'm like, it's fine. We're good on. But yeah, I think that's a huge point of, like, people get so invested, it becomes like a part of their family. This is a person in my life. This brand means that much to me. It's huge. It's so important.
And it can be vitamins. It can be a pen.
Anything.
It can be a note paper that you take notes down from a really great point you just heard someone say.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be anything.
Never seen Steve write down comments when we and him and I are talking. Never seen that, Steve. There he goes. He's writing something down. Thank you, Steve. But he's shaking his head, which makes me feel like that wasn't a good comment.
Well, I bought your book.
That is true.
I looked you up.
You did.
I still love you, brother. But
I know you do.
She's bringing some great.
She's bringing the heat. I got it. I know. But for you, Steve, let me ask you then, because why is it that? Because I know you're in that same industry, right? And I don't see many people adopting these things. Like, what makes you different?
Well, I think you have to be okay not conforming. We're talking about Instagram, we're talking about Facebook. They have these algorithms that are they're weaponized to make you conform to a certain perspective. And for you to have the confidence to not do the conformed cliche solution that you learned at the conference, you have to have some chops. You have to have been doing it a while. You need to have failed and have settled into a little bit of a confidence of your own. I think that's why. And when you stumble into someone that thinks the way you do or writes a book that you really appreciate, I think that's why you bond with them. You reach out to them.
Yeah. Good point. Well, I'm sure we could probably talk all day. I know we could, in fact, but unfortunately, we probably should wrap it up. So, Sarah, first off, thank you so much. This is awesome. I love the conversation. I'm sure we'll probably have you on again. This was a great conversation. How can people learn more about you, learn more about kind of what you offer? Like, how can people contact you?
Yeah. So obviously I'm over on Twitter a ton because that's where my industry lives and breathes. You could just search for @Sarah Levinger, or you can find my website at HG Performance Creative, super long, hgperformancecreative.com. That one is built basically for all types of paid creatives. So if you're doing graphic design, if you're doing UGC, if you're doing full production video, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And speaking of reaching out, Will, tell us about your breakthrough sessions.
I do, guys. So for a number of months now, I've had people ask me, okay, so I like the book, or I know that you do research, but like, I don't know where to start. So I'm gonna make it very, very simple for you. All you have to do is go to mindstategroup.com, and you're going to see a whole bunch of buttons all over the website to learn more about me. But more importantly, you can schedule a breakthrough session. This is all this is. It is 30 minutes, you and I talking about your business where it is now your business where you want to see it in the future, and to see if behavioral science can give you a bridge to the two. Sometimes it can. If it can, I'm going to help you on that. I'm going to show you whether I can help you or I'm going to get you in touch with somebody who can. If it's not a good solve for you, I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to say you're not in that place where you need to be. And again, I'll try to help you, and find a solution for you. So it's a really easy way to learn more about what we do, but learn more about your business more importantly. And if you want to grow, if you're kind of in a growth spurt right now, you're in quarter 2, guys, you're not making plan. If you're not making plan, don't wait until quarter 3, at the end of quarter 3 to figure that out. Let's talk early. So go over there. You can look at my calendar, set up a 30-minute appointment, and we can just talk all things behavioral science. And maybe we can even get you to write down some things that I say, like Steve did. If we get to that point, you're going to be in a great place.
If you don't have Will's book, he's wrote it all down for you. You don't have to write it down. Go get Will's book because it'll help you look at marketing different. The problem with marketing is everybody approaches it from a one size fits all, but we're all in different moods at different times, and people tee up in a particular mindset when they're considering a solution. And if you know what that mindset is when they're considering your solution, then your messaging is going to resonate all the better. So, all right. So now we're going to take it out. I'm going to turn on the music. You ready to dance a little bit?
Ready. We're ready.
You were on stage this past week. Did you?
This was in my ear. The whole, not this song, but this same basic beat. So it's 4 days in a row. I'm going to. Yeah, there it is.
All right. Well, be sure catch the Mindstate Marketing on a podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. The Mindstate's Hour. I'm going to get it right finally, and also on YouTube. It's the Mindstate channel. Watch. You can catch up. Sarah, you were a great guest.
Yep, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was fun. I really enjoyed
fun.
it. I took my notes. I hope you guys did. We'll see you next week. You guys be good.
See you guys.